Thank you guys all for being here. So I'm going to go ahead and tease out a few global trends that we've been seeing in the out-of-home landscape in partnership from a soon-to-be-released report that MAGNA will be sharing. For those of you that aren't aware, Rapport is the out-of-home shop, and MAGNA is the intelligence arm of IPG media brands. So essentially, they harness all the aggregated media investments from IPG clients to provide these advertising revenue forecasts, and they've been doing this for over 60 years. All of the data comes across all media channels in over 70 markets. So essentially, we're being able to represent 95% of the world economy, which is really allowing us to share some of these trends. So we're gonna go ahead and bring some experts onto the floor, and they're gonna dive a little bit deeper and bring some of these data points that we're finding to life. So go ahead and let's welcome Tom from the World Out of Home organization, Lucy from Vistar Media, John from AdNet Zero, and Matthew from Alight Media. So we're going to jump right in, as I know timing is of the essence for those that need to hit some flights. But the first trend, and this is really a long-standing trend that we've been seeing, is out-of-home is the fastest-growing media traditional media channel globally. And this has been something that's remained since before the pandemic. Last year, I know as an industry, we were very excited that we were able to surpass pre-COVID levels, hitting over a record of $32 billion in global out-of-home spend. And this is something that continues to really increase. I know we're looking at right now a 6.5% increase last year. This year, in terms of growth, it is slowing slightly at about 5.6%, but we're the only channel that continues to grow, pandemic aside. And you can see on this chart too, TV and radio are having a little bit of a flux right now, but that's really, it attributes to the Olympics as well as the election. That's not something that we're forecasting to really continue on. And as we look towards 2028, we're actually predicting that global ad revenue for out of home will get to about 40 billion. And so with that, we really attributed this growth to 4 key drivers. And that's digitization, automation, innovation, and sustainability. So I wanted to lob this one over to you, Tom, as you're really at the forefront. You know, you're thinking and seeing these emerging trends build momentum across all 4 of these pillars. And we'd love for you just to talk a little bit more of what are you seeing that's really driving that growth on a global scale?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Digitization first. I mean, what's not to like about digitization? You know, at a practical level, you have illumination 24/7. You have a much better image quality, which is attracting a lot of the higher end brands like fashion. Lead times are reduced from weeks to hours. Service visits, just touching on the sustainability point, service visits dropped to 2 a year from, in some cases in Europe, 24 visits a year. And the biggest opportunity, I think, that digitization has for our industry is connectivity. And I just want to give you a staggering figure. It's always interesting to note the numbers from different markets. But in Australia, the digital revenues as part of out-of-home are now over 70% of overall spend, the same as in the UK. And in Australia, out-of-home is growing by almost double digit. And in the UK, 70% of revenues are coming off just under 10% of the locations. So you have a situation where we're, particularly in large format, we're moving towards a less is more, higher quality, especially in the digitization world. But the biggest opportunity is connectivity, and it's the one that we haven't really got right. In fact, I continually am moaning as president of the World Organization about this particular aspect, because if we get the connectivity right, and all of the digital screens have the technical ability to do this, we will enter the big world of the wider digital market, which leads me nicely on to automation. Not using our connectivity in a optimum way is a bit like having a Ferrari and driving it all the time at 15 miles an hour. It's just a complete waste of ability. And in data, we heard it yesterday from a lot of the CMOs, the key thing is measurement and data and common standards. And it's no good automating if you don't have measurement. If we don't have measurement and data, having the ability to automate isn't going to allow us to access that wider world that I'm just talking about. And it transcends trading. It's not just about programmatic entry, it's about also the complexity of trading the rest of our industry, both static and digital, because it's very expensive and it's very complex still to buy out of home because our automation is in silos, it's fragmented, it doesn't have common standards, and we're competing against media that can buy large-scale audiences in a much simpler way. So I think, for me, ad tech is a potential game changer, but we just have to get better. I always wonder why that there aren't more larger platforms owned by media owners. There are a couple. I mean, JCDecaux have the View product, and I know Lamar have invested in Vistar. I know the IBO here in the United States are developing a central platform for their members' inventory. I think media owners need more of that. I think we need more of that in the world so that we can offer scaled audiences at a very economic price with fast transactions. I think media owners have become a bit too remote from the brands, and I think if we build more SSPs of scale, I think that will be addressed. Basically, there are too many doors to go through from the media owner to the brand. My final point on tech is that we just need some really big thinking in terms of how we do this in a more cohesive way. So on to innovation, and frankly, most of the innovations that are happening internationally are happening here. There's quite a few happening here that we learn from and introduce, but I just want to mention three, and one is the adoption of AI is happening rapidly now across the international markets, and at our Hong Kong conference, Stephen from Ocean Outdoor is giving a presentation on how AI is helping Ocean Outdoor to be more competitive and more efficient. You've got a lot more interactive campaign activity, and we talked about 3D and anamorphic yesterday. There's plenty of that here, but I don't know if it's because of the architecture within international cities, but anamorphic is much bigger. But where we actually lose out is that most advertisers are now using anamorphic for the amplify effect in social media, and we don't get paid for that. So I think what we have to do is find a way to monetize that. So I'm conscious, Laura, of time, and I've been a typical Irishman blarneying here for 5 minutes or so. The final point on sustainability I've spoken about for those of you who were here 20 minutes ago, and I'd like to yield my time on that to John, who's going to give us some insights on that side. So those are my thoughts on those 4 points.
Thank you. No, and John will definitely dive a little bit deeper in a bit. We're going to go right into the next point. So this is that digital out of home is the fastest growing media segment globally. We're seeing and projecting growth for about 12.5, or a little over 12%. Which is amazing when you think about how remarkable this is when we're competing against social and search and online digital. That being said, as we look towards the future, it is starting to slow. As we look at 2028, some of our forecasts are showing that our growth is going to slip to 8 to 9%. Still impressive, not by any means to be something to be concerned about, but it keeps going back and forth with social as social continues to climb. And so I think we've seen the power of being able to integrate, right? Instead of being able to compete against each other, how can we better work together in concert? And so I think this is something I want to lob this one over to you, Matthew, as we've really seen digital hit critical mass, and you've done an incredible job with Alight Media becoming one of the fastest digital out-of-home providers in the UK. And I think a big part of that was your approach to thinking about our industry from a consumer marketing lens. How do we get our advertising dollars to work really harder by putting the audience first, but also thinking about digital in a different approach? So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that, as I think it could also help us from where digital out-of-home fits within the larger ecosystem, but also from a business standpoint.
Yeah, thank you very much. So my background before I became a media owner was I built a career as a marketing director and commercial officer on the client side. So I still try and keep with me now my philosophy of consumer first. Ultimately, we're trying to change consumers' hearts, minds, and behavior. So if we start with the consumer and then think about the client and look at everything through that lens, I think we end up in a slightly different place. So I'm going to use the example of my business partly to give you some worked examples, but partly because it really is money where your mouth is and real world experience to inform these points of view. So I describe our business as not being a digital out-of-home media owner, but rather doing digital media in the public domain. And I think that gets us to ask very different questions and give very different answers to the way that it might have been done traditionally. So the first trend that I would call out that I see that I think we need to keep hold of is we know that audiences are really important. And I think we've seen all other media, either, especially offline media, shrinking their audience or highly fragmenting it. So I think we need to continue to be loud and proud with the fact that we have a large audience, a growing audience, high frequency and fast cover build. And if we could go on to the next slide, a worked example for me is we started just before the pandemic. And we've been able to develop, we had 3 product ranges, but one of those, the one you can now see on screen, is we have Britain's biggest digital billboard network for audience. And we've been able to do that, and it's a trend I see beyond my business, by saying, actually, outdoor media owners focus their capital perfectly reasonably on the big cities. So in the UK, when we set out, 80 or 90% of the roadside digital assets are in the top 5 cities, but that's less than 20% of the population. So by going everywhere else, I think we bring our medium back to its original strength of saying we're a high reach, high frequency, fast cover build medium. And I think that's incredibly important to keep hold of as we go on. And on the next slide, you'll see by doing that, again, this is our example, but I think it applies to the medium and loud and proud. We are bigger than big profile brands. We talked a lot yesterday about TikTok or X and various other big profile brands who can have deep engagement and high addiction, but actually the reach is not as big as people might think. So even my business is well ahead of them in delivery in the UK on the audiences. Then the next question is, okay, we're loud and proud about big audiences, but how do we do digital differently? So coming to this as a former CMO, I look at our digital screens, and it appalls me the extent to which so many of them are still used like really expensive scrollers, running the same loop of 6 or 7 or 8 ads for 2 weeks or 1 week or whatever your market does. So these are well-worn examples where we have something that's bespoke to the temperature or location or time of day. What I think matters is they're no longer stunts or specials, they're automated at scale. In fact, quite a lot of the cleverness isn't necessarily seen on screen. The creative might look vanilla and flat, but it's more about how you choose what to go where. So when we think about a digital first or a digitally native mentality, look, if your campaign or your client needs to have the same ad on screen every minute for a week, great, we can tell you that. But actually, I think we do our medium a disservice by starting with that philosophy rather than going up the value chain closer to what the client needs. So if they need a particular audience or time of day or trigger event or number of activities or plays and so on, there are any number of different things that we ought to be packaging and selling them as other media do. So trying to take a digital first mentality, and a lot of media owners or buyers will use programmatic to get around their restrictions, which is great, but I think that's underplaying the power of programmatic, and there's much more we can do with it. And if we have a digital first mentality, both in planning what we sell and the commercials, we get to open up new dollars. There's also, if we think consumer first, there's the importance of being respectful to the communities that we host our screens. So for example, in Britain, there's a very charismatic guy called Tim Peake, who is a very famous British astronaut. We commissioned a public artist to do a series of art for us called Astronaut, Britain's first astronaut preferred women's underwear. We've had a really strong reaction to it because here she is on the next slide. You'll see this is Helen Sharman, the first astronaut from Britain. And it's one example of public art. It's one of the many things we do to try and connect with our communities and give advertisers a different context for where they appear. Now I know we're short on time, so I'll skip to my final section. There's a lot of talk yesterday about retail media. And if we think about our medium as digital media in the public domain, then you think differently about, well, where else do we take that? So we now have about 1,500 screens live in pubs, bars and clubs across the UK, and that's growing quite fast. And we're now literally going up against people like TikTok and TV budgets and so on to get people on here. We can prove the uplift, highly provable, and a big brand build. And I think that what this is showing differently is that our medium has the ability to go beyond putting up digital scrollers and into competing directly with different desks in agencies and different parts of the client mindset for how they can grow physical, digital as a form of social media. So it's all about starting, I think, differently with how you think about the consumer and the marketing budget as a digitally native medium.
Awesome. And this translates right into our next bullet point, so thank you. So the other finding that we had found is programmatic. I think it's no surprise of the rise and the growth of programmatic. It was really accelerated by the pandemic, right, with needing to be able to be more agile in terms of our investments, turning media on and off, and really following our consumers in different mobility patterns. So we're forecasting right now that a quarter of all digital out-of-home spend by 2026 will be traded programmatically, which is pretty wild when you think about that. Equates to about $3 billion in just 2 years' time of global ad revenue. So obviously this is here to stay. I think even as we were hearing some of the panels yesterday, it's also almost like an introductory for certain brands that haven't really embraced out of home or more digital focused. They're almost using programmatic as kind of getting into the space, which is also exciting. So Lucy, flipping this one over to you, obviously as a heavy hitter in the ecosystem, what are you really seeing on a global scale that's accelerating this growth?
Yeah, so we can flip to the next slide. I put together 5 kind of points that I believe are leading to this growth. So the first, which we can flip here, is around globalization. So when we think about the opportunity for any channel to really explode, it needs to be something that is available at scale, which doesn't just mean in a single market. It's the ability to buy easily across markets in different currencies, and again, going with ease. So the simplicity of the way different technology platforms have allowed for global buying, as well as, of course, the proliferation of digital screens becoming more prevalent across the globe, has really helped for programmatic to take off in a bigger way. The next is around targeting. So I think often when we talk about targeting, and specifically in programmatic, often audiences is kind of the first piece that we think about. So when we want to reach a particular audience across multiple channels, we should be doing it the same way on a consistent basis across every single media owner that we are leveraging as part of an opportunity. So on the top here, you can see some of the audience providers that are really prevalent, especially in the digital world. Being able to translate these same types of audience segments and providers into something that allows for us to target out of home in a seamless way, where we're reaching that same audience in different places throughout the physical world, has a lot of weight. We've also seen that most of the holding companies have invested heavily in actually purchasing a lot of these data assets and really putting time and development into these being available. And so helping for agencies and brands to be able to take their first-party data or data-owned assets and bring them to life is really important. I think that being said, we shouldn't discount the fact that in general, out-of-home plays a really interesting role within the purchase funnel and the ability to reach people in a contextual way, especially as data is changing. So thinking about whether it's contextual targeting, day of week, time of day, the ability to reach people within a particular radius of stores, and also to mix and match a lot of these tactics is allowing for us to do more interesting things and be more efficient with our spend. The next is around accountability. I think, again, similarly, we talk a lot about measurement. What does measurement mean? We're typically talking about the ability to reach an audience and then actually understand the impact that a campaign had on a brand's sales, typically, or other metrics that are indicators of sales, brand awareness, potentially looking at consideration or foot traffic. So depending on the campaign, being able to actually leverage the same measurement providers that exist in other channels means that out-of-home isn't sitting in its own little corner and being judged differently. In addition to that, there's other types of accountability. So whether that's verification, understanding that there's full transparency in programmatic, where there's still all of the media owners are providing that creative approval. There's still that accountability of knowing actually where your ads are going to run and ensuring that that is correct is super important. And then, of course, sustainability is becoming more and more a part of campaigns and thinking about where you want to put those dollars and how it can relate to the global impact from a carbon emission standpoint and otherwise. The next is around the rise of retail media. So when we think about this, there's really 4 main elements within retail media, and I think often we're really just thinking about screens in store, but it's actually a way bigger opportunity than just that. So on the right-hand side, these are obviously massive retail giants that are thinking about how they want to show up in the out-of-home space. And they've started growing these incredible retail networks where a lot of it is digital first, thinking about their website, reaching people off property. But that can now also relate into the way that they're thinking about monetizing other types of assets. So whether that is putting up screens in store to reach people in a unique way with really, really strong assets that they own themselves, thinking about the programmatic monetization of that inventory. If you're putting in a capital investment to put screens in these stores, being able to also hedge your bets a little bit of not being only your responsibility to sell those assets, but making them also available to a wider ecosystem has a lot of value in how that can enter into programmatic. Path to purchase buying, so thinking about how other types of screens that are not just in store can be a part of that retail media journey. So thinking about billboard screens that are, at the gas station, thinking about other screens that kind of show up before someone might go into store and make a purchase. And then of course their data. These companies hold data very, near and dear to their heart, and being able to leverage that in a way that now can be used across programmatic in out of home is also a part of why programmatic has the opportunity to have strong synergies with retail. And then the last is around creative solutions. So, these are just a few examples of how we're seeing more and more of these concepts show up, whether that is leveraging QR codes, anamorphic 3D, thinking about, all of these different ways that programmatic can help to, of course, automate, leverage data, but at the same time, creative is what brings it all together. It's about how you're showing up in the real world, making sure that you're actually encouraging people to take action. And I think as a whole within out of home, we are trying to make programmatic not just automate, but actually help us to run better campaigns on behalf of our clients, which is really what should matter the most. And I think creative really helps to pull it all together.
Perfect segue to the next data point. And this is all about creativity. I think, of course, from an efficiency standpoint, that's something we really pride ourselves. But at Rapport, we actually have an in-house global solutions team, and we have seen a 79% increase in investment when it comes to experiential activations as well as amplified media. And so when I'm talking amplified, it's really about incorporating AR, CGI extensions on top of out of home. Anamorphic, of course, and as well as just builds, creating those experiences. And I think this is one area that brands, agencies have really just leaned in of that, creating that experience. Time and time again, we keep asking, how do we enhance that storytelling? How do we make a deeper connection with our audiences in real life? And this is how you do it. So I don't want to keep going because I really want to get to the sustainability piece, being mindful of time. So this is the last pillar that we wanted to focus on, is sustainability. This has become an increasingly a big focus of topic for our clients. Our top 20 clients at media brands have net neutral or carbon zero goals, and they're leaning in. In the last 2 years, we've seen them implement new initiatives. Almost every single pitch response that comes off our desk, it's all about sustainability. What are they doing as a corporation, and how are we as a potential agency of record going to help deliver on some of those responsibilities? What solutions are we bringing to the table? And so John, you've obviously done a tremendous job at Net Zero of just spreading awareness and helping us start. I think this is one area as an aspect of a channel if we don't want to be left behind. We've talked about this with measurement, other aspects of our business, and real dollars are on the line at this point. So I'd love to hear from you, more or less just a candid chat of where are we at and what could we be doing?
Yeah, so I'm not going to talk about sustainability. I'm going to frame this up really, really briefly. I'm going to frame it up in the context of how decisions are being made. Oftentimes decisions come down to budget, timing, quality. These are decisions that we make each and every day. Some are small, some are big. Increasingly, decisions are going to be made based on a fourth leg of the stool, and that leg is a currency around sustainability standards. It's around measurement of carbon emissions. More and more advertisers are asking these questions of the agencies and the suppliers they work with. The problem is this industry, while we're awesome at data, we're nowhere in terms of building a consensus, a common currency, a way of measuring carbon emissions. This is super critical because I go into a lot of different boardrooms and into agencies and a lot of different companies, and guess what? They're starting to form closer in partnerships. So imagine a giant game of musical chairs. Think of the holding companies. When the music stops, you need to have a seat. There are going to be fewer and fewer seats because there are too many companies out there. So what I'm seeing is big agencies are building more cohesive, integrated sort of like partnerships. So trust me, you want to have a seat at that table. I love the outdoor space. The OAAA is in a partnership with AdNet Zero. I'm here because I believe in this sector and I believe in this industry. And as the saying goes, before you go, you got to know. We can't do anything in terms of improving the carbon footprint until we know where we currently stand. So my job one is to create a benchmark for the industry and then work with other trade organizations like the ANA, GARM, IAB, and the 4As to set these standards and do really good things. Here's why I'm excited, because as I walk around this conference for the last couple of days, I'm seeing signs of sustainability. I'm seeing partnerships form. BSV and Green Signs came together, and now they've got some great, more efficient, more energy-conscious signs right out of Chicago. We're seeing programs come to life. We're seeing innovation start to pop up. These are things that we should double and triple down on and accentuate and highlight and amplify. That is partly what I do on behalf of the supporters that we have. So I'm really passionate about it. If I had an ask, engage, learn more. You can find me on LinkedIn. John Osborn is my name. I was a former CEO of Omnicom's OMD, before that BBDO, and I am deeply, deeply hopeful. I know somebody walks in a room and says sustainability, half the room tunes out. I totally get it, but I come in peace and I come with sleeves up because this is something that we can actually do a really good job around and make sure that we have a rightful seat at that table. That's why I care, because profit and purpose don't have to be on totally different ends of the spectrum. They can come together.
Amazing. We are over time, so I'm going to wrap it right here. But thank you so much. I think we all believe out of home really is having our moment, but it's about making sure we're thinking about the future and how we can keep educating and innovating. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.